the illusion of invincibility. The world held its breath. The Wehrmacht, Adolf Hitler's war machine, seemed unstoppable. With lightning-fast strikes and overwhelming force, they conquered vast territories, shattering enemy defenses with terrifying efficiency. They won battle after battle, seemingly destined for total victory. But beneath the gleaming surface of their triumphs lay a fatal flaw, a strategic miscalculation that would ultimately lead to their devastating downfall. This is the story of how the Wehrmacht won nearly every battle, but still lost the war. The early years of World War II were defined by the Wehrmacht's mastery of Blitzkrieg, lightning war. Coordinated attacks by tanks, infantry, and air power overwhelmed opponents before they could effectively react. Poland fell in weeks. France, a major European power, surrendered in a matter of months. The world watched in stunned disbelief as the Wehrmacht steamrolled across the continent. Each victory fueled the myth of their invincibility, a perception that would have profound consequences. The Wehrmacht was undoubtedly a highly professional and well-trained fighting force, particularly in offensive operations. Their tactics in the early war were revolutionary and incredibly effective at achieving short-term objectives. However, these stunning tactical victories masked a crucial strategic oversight. Hitler and his high command became fixated on immediate gains, often neglecting the larger strategic picture and the long-term implications of their relentless expansion. The strain of endless expansion. The relentless pace of conquest placed an enormous strain on Germany's resources and manpower. Supply lines stretched across thousands of miles, becoming increasingly vulnerable to partisan activity and Allied air power. The vast occupied territories required a significant commitment of troops simply for administration and security, diverting valuable fighting units from the front lines. Winning battles meant occupying more land, which in turn demanded more resources, a vicious cycle that Germany's economy was ultimately unable to sustain. The Germans were masters of the operational level of war, but their grand strategy was flawed. They lacked a coherent long-term vision and failed to adequately plan for the logistical challenges of a protracted conflict across such immense distances. The sheer scale of their ambition began to work against them. Each victory brought new enemies and new fronts, diluting their forces and spreading them thin. The turning point, the Eastern Front. The invasion of the Soviet Union in June 1941, Operation Barbarossa, was the ultimate manifestation of the Wehrmacht's strategic overreach. Initial successes were staggering, with German forces driving deep into Soviet territory. But the sheer size of the Soviet Union, its immense population, and the resilience of the Red Army began to take their toll. The Blitzkrieg tactics that had proven so effective in the West faltered in the face of the vast distances and the unwavering Soviet resistance. The Battle of Stalingrad was a critical turning point. The Wehrmacht achieved a significant tactical victory by capturing much of the city, but the protracted and brutal fighting bled their forces dry. The subsequent Soviet counteroffensive trapped and destroyed an entire German army, a strategic catastrophe. Stalingrad became a symbol of the Wehrmacht's fatal mistake. They had won countless battles on the Eastern Front, but they had failed to achieve their ultimate strategic objective, the swift and decisive defeat of the Soviet Union. The immense losses of men and material on the Eastern Front began to irrevocably shift the balance of power. Winning battles, losing the war of attrition. As the war dragged on, the strategic consequences of Germany's relentless expansion became increasingly apparent. The Allied powers, particularly the United States, possessed vastly superior industrial capacity. While the Wehrmacht continued to win localized battles, Germany's ability to replace lost equipment and manpower dwindled. The relentless Allied bombing campaigns further crippled German industry and infrastructure, making it increasingly difficult for the Wehrmacht to sustain its war effort. The Germans were fighting a war of attrition against opponents with far greater resources. Even their tactical victories could not compensate for the mounting losses and the inability to replenish their strength on a strategic level. Each lost tank, each fallen soldier, each bombed factory chipped away at Germany's ability to wage war. The Wehrmacht continued to fight with skill and determination, but they were fighting a losing battle against the overwhelming might of the Allied coalition. The inevitable collapse. Despite occasional tactical successes and fierce resistance, the strategic momentum had irrevocably shifted. The Western Allies opened a second major front in Europe, further stretching Germany's already depleted forces. The Wehrmacht, despite its continued battlefield prowess, was fighting on multiple fronts with dwindling resources and a crumbling logistical network. The relentless pressure from both East and West proved too much to bear. In the end, the Wehrmacht's inability to translate tactical victories into strategic success sealed its fate. They had won countless battles, but they had lost the war of attrition, the war of resources, and ultimately the war itself. The final battles in the ruins of German cities were a stark testament to the catastrophic failure of Hitler's grand strategy. The Wehrmacht, once the seemingly invincible force that had swept across Europe, was reduced to a desperate and ultimately futile defense. The story of the Wehrmacht serves as a powerful reminder that tactical brilliance alone is not enough to guarantee victory in war. Strategic vision, long-term planning, and the ability to sustain a protracted conflict are equally crucial. The Wehrmacht's fatal mistake was to equate winning battles with winning the war, a fundamental miscalculation that ultimately led to the destruction of Nazi Germany and the tragic loss of millions of lives. Their initial successes were dazzling, but in the end, they proved that even the most formidable war machine can crumble when it loses sight of the overarching strategic objectives and the enduring realities of total war.